This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
I'm Roby Brock. Welcome to the program. We're glad to have you with us. This last week in Washington, D.C. saw Justice Brett Kavanaugh sworn in on the U.S. Supreme Court, and it saw the resignation of UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. I caught up with Senator Tom Cotton for his take on events. Senator, let's begin with Nikki Haley's pending departure from the United Nations. Who do you think is a likely pick to replace her? Can you share any thoughts with us on why she may be leaving? And I know you got the president's ear all the time on international affairs. Are you in the running for that post?
Well, Roby, I'm definitely not. I'm very happy to be representing the people of Arkansas in the United States Senate. I want to thank Nikki Haley for her service to our country as the UN ambassador. You know, Nikki has been in public service now for almost a decade between the South Carolina legislature and South Carolina governor and now the United Nations. I think, she, for family reasons, wanted to take a pause. That's very understandable, and I wish her the very best. I've spoken to the president since Ambassador Haley made her announcement. He has a short list that he's walking through. She's going to be serving until the end of the year, so he's not in a rush to make a decision. He wants to get a correct decision, not a fast decision.
Well, you didn't answer my question. Are you on that list that he may be considered? Who do you think's a potential likely pick?
I'm definitely not on that list, Roby. I don't want to get into what the president and I discussed about it, but we have many very capable diplomats or national security professionals who could take that job over, and I know the president's going to be interviewing them in the coming days, as will Secretary of Pompeo, and I'm sure they'll make a good decision. We'll look forward to confirming that person in the Senate.
All right, fair enough there. Let's talk about what you guys have focused a lot of the month of October on so far, and that is the Brett Kavanaugh appointment to the Supreme Court. Certainly has roiled Washington and certainly had repercussions across the country. I want to talk about some of your comments after the vote, after Justice Kavanaugh was appointed. You said that the crazed, hysterical attempt of left-wing mob rule had failed. I see fault among Democrats and Republicans in this whole process here. Does it help any to divide the country in that way by taking these hyper-partisan sides and making comments like that after your guy got picked?
Well, Roby, what we saw in the United States Capitol over this last weekend were crazed left-wing mobs. I can tell you that. You had Susan Collins and her staff who were facing death threats and rape threats. She had to have an armed police escort to move to and from her home. Some of these crazed mobs broke down barricades at the Supreme Court building and started banging on the front doors of the Supreme Court. It's one thing to oppose a nomination like Justice Kavanaugh because you disagree on his views of the Constitution or judicial interpretation. It's another thing, though, to make unfounded accusations without any corroborating evidence and slander the name of a good man with crimes like sexual assault or drug running or even serial gang rape. The Democrats went far over the line in this case, and they helped whip up some of this frenzy. I think they're beginning to realize that they overreached badly, as you see so many people around the country rejecting these tactics. And I think it was very important that we stood up for the presumption of innocence and due process and basic decency and fairness. Again, it's one thing to oppose a judicial nominee because of his judicial views or his views on the Constitution, but it's another thing to use the kind of smear tactics the Democrats did over the last 3 weeks. I hope we won't see it again, having beaten it back this first time.
Well, in all fairness, I mean, you have to look at the president and his rhetoric and the fact that there are many times that he is whipping crowds, auditoriums, stadiums full of people into frenzies in very much the same fashion on unfounded accusations, on things that are taking things out of context, if not outright misleading or false at times. I mean, does the president bear some criticism from you in terms of some of his antics and some of his tactics in terms of doing that?
Roby, the people that bear the criticism here are people like Chuck Schumer and Dianne Feinstein, who rushed to condemn a good man without any evidence, without the presumption of innocence, and then encourage the kind of frenzied mob activity we saw even in the hallways of the Congress last week, Roby. You had Capitol Police that were having to hold back protesters and demonstrators from senators like Susan Collins. That's where the responsibility lies for what you saw over the last few weeks. Again, it was very important not just to confirm a good jurist to the Supreme Court, but given the tactics we saw on the Capitol last weekend, that we reject this efforts to kind of run roughshod over basic due process and the presumption of innocence. We don't want to see what happened last weekend ever happen again.
I'm assuming that you're saying in your answer in that you don't see that happening on the Republican side or from the president's point of view, is I guess my takeaway on that. Let's talk about the midterms are coming up. It is the push for gains in the Senate is on the Senate agenda, something that you're hopeful for. The House is obviously in contention for the Democrats. Is this election, this midterm election, is this going to be a referendum on Donald Trump as the president has asked for it to be?
Roby, midterm elections are always, to a degree, a choice about a president's first 2 years in office, but they're also about the agenda on which we campaign and on which we've delivered. We have a booming economy. We have unemployment at one of its lowest rates ever. Wages are growing for working class folks. Crime is decreasing across our country. America is once again respected in the world. We've confirmed 2 very capable jurists of the Supreme Court. That's a record of achievement that Republicans are happy to run on all around the country. And I think we're going to see gains in the Senate. I think we're going to hold the House of Representatives as well.
All right, last question for you. What are you going to do between now and Election Day? What's on the Senate agenda up there? Anything we should be keeping our eye on?
Well, we still have a lot of judges left to confirm. The Democrats have been blockading these judges, as well as executive branch nominees, for almost 2 years now. To give you a sense of just the extreme lengths to which they've gone, we've had 117 votes now to end debate on executive or judicial nominations. Barack Obama and George Bush in their first 2 years combined, so 4 years total, had fewer than 15 of those votes. So it's really up to the Democrats how long we stay in session. They have many more incumbents who need to go campaign. We can voice vote most of these non-controversial nominees, but we're not going to go home. People aren't going to hit the campaign trail until we do the work the Senate should have done months ago and confirm these nominees to the bench and to the executive branch.
I got to ask you though, have you not seen the Republicans deploy these exact same stalling tactics when the Democrats had their majorities, or when President Obama was nominating some of his some folks? Why is it different in this respect?
Yeah. So Roby, I've never seen Republicans accuse a Democratic nominee of being a serial gang rapist without evidence. Since you mentioned Barack Obama, though, perhaps you're talking about Merrick Garland. Let me explain the difference. With Merrick Garland, the Senate majority decided not to confirm a nominee in the president's 8th year. Our chosen method for not confirming him was not going forward with a hearing and a vote, which we knew was not going to succeed. By contrast, in this case, the Senate minority has obstructed a nominee in the president's 2nd year by accusing him of peddling drugs and being a serial gang rapist. Those are vastly different cases.